What if the narrative surrounding Custer's last stand has been meticulously fabricated? For over a century, first-hand testimonies have surfaced, depicting a conflict so brutal and perplexing that it challenges all rational understanding. Soldiers left to perish, extraordinary acts of valor, and an enigma that continues to linger over the desolate plains. Are you prepared to discover the truth? Stay with us until the conclusion, as what we are about to disclose may completely alter your perception of this notorious event. Welcome to White History and Native Roots. Please like, subscribe, and prepare yourself as we delve into history's layers like never before. Imagine America in the summer of 1876, a nation on the brink of turmoil, its aspirations clashing violently with the indigenous peoples it aimed to dominate. The Black Hills of South Dakota, glistening with unexploited gold, had become an irresistible temptation for white settlers, despite being sacred territory for the Lakota Sioux and protected under the 1868 Treaty of Fort Laramie. However, the commitments made on paper were easily disregarded in the face of greed. Prospectors flooded the area, trampling on native rights, while the U.S. government opted for military action rather than negotiation. The Lakota, Cheyenne, and Arapaho, determined to protect their lands and way of life, resisted orders to relocate to reservations, setting the stage for a confrontation that would leave a lasting stain on history. Amidst this volatile situation was General George Armstrong Custer, a flamboyant war hero leading the 7th Cavalry assigned to subdue the hostiles. On June 25th, near the banks of the Little Bighorn River in Montana, their fates intertwined in a confrontation that would resonate through history. A violent clash of cultures, a series of grave miscalculations, and a tragedy enveloped in lingering mysteries. What transpired that day was not merely a battle. It was a plunge into chaos, witnessed by individuals whose accounts are about to be revealed. Our expedition commenced on June 22, 1876, when the 7th Cavalry departed from a camp near Rosebud Creek, enduring the scorching midday heat. The sound of boots crunching on the dry earth resonated as we advanced 12 miles up the Rosebud, ultimately stopping to set up camp beneath a vast sky filled with stars. At dawn on June 23rd, we continued our journey, following a trail marked by fresh signs of native activity, maintaining a relentless pace until nightfall, when we paused once again along the rugged route. By June 24th, a sense of urgency swept through the ranks as 6 Crow scouts, sent out earlier by Custer, returned with thrilling news. Fresh pony tracks crisscrossed the ground, indicating a large Indian village just beyond the horizon. Custer gathered his officers as twilight faded, their whispers too soft for us enlisted men to hear, yet the tension in the air was unmistakable. The scouts were dispatched once more, and at 11 p.m., Custer's command broke the silence. We would march tonight. Through the dark, we navigated the right fork of the Rosebud, the air thick with the scent of sagebrush and the sweat of both men and horses. As dawn arrived on June 25th, the scouts hurried back, breathless and wide-eyed. The village is there, they reported, with thousands present. We took cover in a ravine near the creek's headwaters, just 3 miles from the divide, where the village lay, its existence confirmed by the scouts' unwavering claims. Custer, never one to delay, mounted his horse alongside his aides and rode off to assess the landscape himself, leaving us to wait anxiously in the shadows. An hour later he returned, his expression one of frustration. "I saw nothing," he muttered, dismissing the scouts' accounts. However, Nook Byer, a half-native guide, along with the Crow scouts, stood resolute, their voices piercing through his skepticism. "It's there, General, and the Sioux are aware of our presence. War parties are already mobilizing." Custer's demeanor hardened, his jaw clenched as he issued the order that would determine our fate. "Prepare for combat." We proceeded with caution along a narrow creek for 6 exhausting miles, each rustle in the underbrush heightening our anxiety. Then a foreboding sight came into view. A solitary Indian lodge marked the entrance to Little Horn Valley, with a lifeless warrior lying at its threshold, a grim portent of the bloodshed that awaited us. 5 miles away, clouds of dust rose into the sky, indicating the presence of hundreds, possibly thousands of horses galloping across the plains. Custer's eyes sparkled with a perilous thrill. "They are retreating," he proclaimed, misinterpreting the signs and believing the native forces were in flight. He quickly penned a note to Major Marcus Reno. "Direct the scouts toward the dust. Attack immediately." Reno, commanding his battalion, urged his men across the river at a shallow crossing, the frigid water splashing against their horses as they surged onto the open prairie. After a mile, he commanded them to dismount and establish a skirmish line, sending their horses into a nearby thicket for protection. However, the horizon soon came alive. Mounted native warriors, their war cries echoing like thunder across the valley, multiplied with each passing moment. Reno's skirmishers opened fire, the sharp reports of rifles resonating in the air. But the enemy was quick and strategic, maneuvering to cut off Reno's escape route back to the river. "Retreat to the trees!" Reno shouted, desperation lacing his voice as the situation deteriorated. The Sioux and Cheyenne pursued with unyielding ferocity, their bullets and arrows slicing through the ranks, bringing down men and horses in a chaotic frenzy. Wounded soldiers staggered toward cover, their cries lost amid the din of battle, while the distant wails of mourning from the native village provided a haunting backdrop to the carnage. Let us immerse ourselves in the experiences of the soldiers and scouts who endured this harrowing ordeal, whose candid and unfiltered narratives create an undeniable and vivid portrayal of the events. I was positioned at the front with the scouts when chaos erupted. We had alerted Custer that the Sioux had detected our presence. War parties were encircling us like wolves, yet he refused to listen, relentlessly pushing us forward as if he were pursuing a phantom. When the confrontation with Reno commenced, I witnessed 13 soldiers, some injured and others visibly shaken, staggering toward the trees. I seized them and instructed them to remain in place and fire their weapons, or they would meet their demise. We huddled in the underbrush for hours, the distant sound of gunfire reverberating through the ground beneath us, unaware that it was Custer's men who were being slaughtered. The air was thick with smoke and the cries of the wounded. It felt as though the very earth was disintegrating around us. Eventually, I guided a small group across the river to Reno's bluffs, evading bullets throughout the journey. But the fear clung to me like a persistent decay. The heat was oppressive, enduring 36 hours without water, with the sun scorching us until our skin cracked. My tongue swelled, filling my mouth and stifling my words, leaving me gasping for breath like a fish out of water. We chewed on grass to trick our stomachs, but it stuck to our chapped lips, bitter and ineffective. I observed men crawling toward the ravine, their bellies scraping the ground, desperate for a sip of water amidst a barrage of Sioux gunfire. One man suffered a devastating leg injury, his bones protruding like a shattered tree branch. He screamed until his voice faded, and they carried him away, later amputating the mangled limb. The wounded were perishing rapidly, their lips bloodied and begging for relief that we were unable to provide. I arrived at Reno's bluffs late, but the scene was forever imprinted in my memory, marked by fire and blood. At dawn on the 26th, the Native Americans attacked us once more, throwing stones when their ammunition ran out. I rallied my men and charged directly into their ranks. This unexpected move caught them off guard and saved a dozen lives that day. The thirst proved to be a silent adversary, overpowering even the strongest among us. Some young men volunteered to retrieve water from the river, located 700 yards away, despite the presence of Sioux sharpshooters hidden in the trees. One young man successfully reached the river, filled his kettle, but was shot in the chest on his return, dying while clutching that water as if it were treasure. We managed to get a small trickle of water up the hill, but it was merely a drop in a vast desert of need. I can honestly say I emerged from Custer's massacre alive. When the warriors descended upon us, I slipped into a ditch, covered myself in dirt, and prayed they would overlook me. As the gunfire ceased and the dust settled, I believed I was the last survivor. Many called me a liar, but I witnessed the aftermath. Bodies mutilated, heads missing, and Custer himself sprawled out, possibly having fallen to a bullet he fired. The truth lies buried with the dead, and I will carry that knowledge to my grave. While Reno's men fought for their lives, Custer took his battalion north, splitting his forces in a daring attempt to flank the village. He relied on the element of surprise, but the Lakota, Cheyenne, and Arapaho, perhaps 3,000 warriors strong, led by formidable leaders like Sitting Bull and Crazy Horse, were prepared, their determination as steadfast as the plains themselves. Custer's more than 200 men scrambled up a rise, now known as Custer Hill, entrenching themselves with rifles firing, their shots echoing until the barrels glowed red and ammunition ran low. The warriors advanced, arrows whistling through the air and bullets striking flesh, transforming the hill into a graveyard. Every soldier alongside Custer was cut down, their bodies left to roast under the unrelenting sun. Native perspectives enrich this narrative. Red Horse, a Lakota warrior, later shared with historians a vivid account of the chaos, describing soldiers falling like grass beneath a scythe, their bravery insufficient against the overwhelming tide. Legends also surround the battle. A Cheyenne tale speaks of a white horse, possibly Custer's own, galloping freely after the massacre, its side stained with blood. Whispers of a ghostly rider persist, a solitary soldier who evaded capture, only to disappear into the wilderness. Sioux legends introduce a more ominous narrative, a curse that condemns anyone who disturbs Custer's remains to an untimely death, their spirits forever tied to the battlefield. This folklore contributes to the enduring enigma surrounding the events. Meanwhile, Reno's ordeal extended into a second day. As dawn broke on June 26th, the Sioux initiated renewed assaults, their forces crashing against the bluffs where soldiers took refuge behind makeshift barricades of saddles, supplies, and the bloated bodies of deceased horses. By mid-morning, the men were tormented by dehydration, their tongues swollen and ineffective, their cries for water rising above the din of gunfire. Untouched hardtack and raw bacon lay abandoned. Without moisture, they felt like swallowing stones. The wounded suffered greatly, their lips cracking, some slipping into feverish delusions as death loomed nearer. A group of volunteers undertook a perilous mission to reach the river, located 700 yards away across open terrain. Sioux sharpshooters lay in wait, ready to pick them off. Approximately 50 men sprinted through this deadly gauntlet, bullets kicking up dirt at their heels, and managed to reach a ravine that provided minimal cover. At the riverbank, concealed warriors opened fire from the trees, compelling the soldiers to inch within 30 feet of the underbrush before rushing out to fill their kettles and canteens. One soldier was struck, his chest torn apart, while another suffered a catastrophic leg injury, the bone shattered beyond repair. He would lose the limb by nightfall. 6 or 7 others returned, injured, their efforts yielding just enough water to prevent collapse, though it was never sufficient to satisfy the collective thirst. By 2 o'clock, the intensity of the native assaults began to wane, although sporadic skirmishes continued until dusk. As darkness descended, the battlefield fell silent, the warriors having departed, and we finally provided water to the horses and mules which were on the brink of death, allowing them to graze on the meager grass. Reno moved us to a higher elevation, strengthening our position as we braced ourselves for a dawn attack that ultimately did not materialize. When dawn broke on June 27th, the plains were deserted, the silence overwhelming, until news arrived that General Terry's relief force was merely 6 miles away. As his troops came into sight, cheers erupted from the horses. Salvation had finally arrived. Terry's men discovered Reno's survivors clinging to existence on the bluffs, but the journey to Custer's Hill unveiled a scene of unimaginable horror. Bodies were strewn across the slope, disfigured beyond recognition, scalped, disemboweled, and skulls crushed by stone mallets wielded by mourning Sioux and Cheyenne women. Captain Benteen later described the anguish, stating it was a torment to the soul, as many were so disfigured that identification was impossible. Survivors recounted a Sioux legend of elderly women lamenting as they roamed the battlefield, smashing heads in a ritual of vengeance and grief. 4 soldiers' heads were eventually discovered in the native camp, their bodies lost amidst the chaos, grim trophies of victory. Custer himself lay among the deceased, his body stripped and pierced, though accounts of his injuries vary. Scout Mr. Haynen estimated that the village housed 6,000 individuals, with 3,000 warriors led by Sitting Bull and a council of chiefs, each carrying a colored flag, red, yellow, white, blue, and black, to direct their fighters. Crazy Horse likely fought alongside them, his group contributing to the ferocity of the assault. Hayton believed that the losses suffered by the Native Americans were comparable to those of the soldiers, highlighting the desperate defense put up by the 7th Cavalry. However, none of Custer's troops managed to escape the encirclement formed by at least 2,500 warriors. Dark tales circulated about individuals like Isaiah Dorman, a black scout who endured torture with small bullet wounds to his legs while still alive, and another victim who was slowly stripped of flesh in a horrific manner. The battlefield transformed into a scene of chaos, filled with blood and grief, revealing that not every individual displayed courage that day. George Herendine recounted the pervasive fear that swept through the ranks, attributing much of the blame to Reno's wavering resolve, which diminished the soldiers' fighting spirit. Dan Neely, known as Crackerbox Dan, hid behind a box of hardtack as bullets whizzed by. Captain Miles Moreland, referred to as Uparajo Mickey, crouched low behind a pack saddle, while Billy Blake pretended to be injured for 2 days, flinching at every noise. They were not inherently cowards, but the harsh realities of battle revealed their vulnerabilities. Conversely, some individuals rose to the occasion. Herendine labored under the scorching sun, dragging dead horses to create makeshift barricades while firing at the enemy, all the while consumed with thoughts of Custer's fate. On June 25th, as smoke and dust rose from the ridge, most warriors left Reno to join the attack on Custer. Gunfire erupted, likely signaling distress, yet no rescue party advanced. Dr. Porter, the surgeon, worked tirelessly, caring for the injured and encouraging men to brave the perilous river crossing. One soldier, shot while attempting to fill his pail, suffered a shattered leg and was dragged back, screaming, a tragic sacrifice for the meager drops he had managed to collect. Herendine's heart ached for Custer's horse, Dandy, a seasoned mount who had endured many rides. Just before departing from Fort Lincoln, Custer had contemplated replacing the aging horse, but there lay Dandy, shot and wounded, his gentle eyes pleading as Herendine caressed his neck. A soft whinny escaped from the horse, a final plea for water and for its master, prompting the scout to weep for the loyalty that had been lost amidst the devastation. As June 26 drew to a close, a solitary Sioux sharpshooter positioned on a hill instilled fear in Reno's men, his buffalo gun taking lives with chilling accuracy. Captain Ryan ultimately silenced him with a long-range shot, and Herendine later discovered the sniper dead behind a boulder, his rifle still clutched in his hand. By late afternoon, most of the native forces retreated to grieve, leaving only a small contingent to keep us pinned down. Hunger tormented us. We had not eaten since dawn on the 25th, subsisting on hardtack and raw bacon that lodged in our dry throats. Exhaustion caused men to collapse where they stood, some too fatigued to fear their impending fate. Herendine took to pacing outside Reno's tent with night watch, where he overheard the major drowning his sorrows in alcohol. "I wonder where the Murray of the American army is now," Reno slurred, ridiculing Custer's downfall, a remark that pierced Herendine's weary spirit. The valley below fell into silence, interrupted only by the distant sound of toms, and the wailing of native mourners. He strained to see the ridge, clinging to the hope of Custer's return, but the night provided no answers, only a heavy stillness that pressed down on every heart. The arrival of General Terry on June 27th ignited ragged cheers, a beacon of hope for Reno's beleaguered remnants. However, the joy quickly soured as they beheld Custer's Hill, the magnitude of the loss settling in. Over 200 men gone, their deaths a national tragedy that ignited calls for vengeance. The Army intensified its efforts, and within a few years the Lakota and Cheyenne were confined to reservations, their resistance extinguished. Herendine often pondered whether it was all just a fevered dream, yearning to awaken young again, tending to horses with Custer's laughter echoing in the air. Yet the harsh truth kept him grounded. The nightmare was tangible, its reverberations lasting. From indigenous folklore, intriguing narratives arise. The renowned ghost of Custer is said to haunt the battlefield, his white hat shimmering beneath the moonlight. There are also theories regarding a hidden stash of gold belonging to the 7th Cavalry, buried prior to the battle, waiting to be unearthed. Native legends, steeped in the tale of a Sioux curse, Trouble Custer's remains, suggesting that your days are limited and your spirit is bound to the plains. Crazy Horse's vision of recounting the battle through a dream adds an eerie sense of prophecy. These narratives, whether factual or fictional, ignite the flames of legend. Was Custer a noble martyr or a reckless leader who divided his forces and disregarded warnings? Did Reno and Benton betray him out of cowardice, or were they simply unable to act? Native perspectives portray it as a just struggle for home and family. The discussion continues to intensify. What is your judgment? Here lies the lingering mystery. Did Custer take his own life, opting for death rather than capture, as some whispers imply? Or did Sitting Bull engineer a fate too grim to document, lost to history? Perhaps the complete story remains out there, inscribed in the earth or carried by the breeze. This is not merely history, it is a wound that refuses to heal, a puzzle yearning for resolution. Share your thoughts in the comments. Was Custer a victim, a villain, or something entirely different? If this exploration of the past captivated you, please like, subscribe, and join us next time.